I'd like to express my gratitude to former Deputy President David Dabete Mabuza, who attended and facilitated last year's dialogue. I also wish to thank former Minister of Cooperative Governance and Traditional Affairs, Dr. Nkosazana Dlamini Zuma, who led the team which supported this House to ensure that last year's dialogue was a success. It was also the first time this approach was used to come together and to dialogue and to have a thoroughgoing discussion about matters of critical concern to the traditional and Khoisan leadership in our country. I wasn't there at last year's dialogue, but I'm informed that the discussions and the engagements were robust, yet they were also cordial. But they were also honest and straightforward, but yet they were also constructive. And most importantly, I'm told that they were grounded on practical realities our communities are experiencing. That is exactly what our communities expect of us as leaders, as you as traditional leaders of our people, and ourselves as leaders who've been elected, are expected to do a whole number of things, particularly at this time when the world is still recovering from the effects of the pandemic, when we are coming to terms with climate change, which, as we heard earlier, is really having an impact, particularly in the rural areas where you lead our people, and where we are contending with rapidly changing geopolitical dynamics. It is at this time when we are called upon to give leadership to a nation facing some of the harshest socio-economic challenges in recent history. Our people expect that we will make 2023 the year of addressing their interests by focusing on the key priorities that we have identified. We are called upon to find solutions to the challenging situations that they face, some of which are posed by the high cost of living, unemployment, continuing poverty and inequality. Our people expect that we will succeed in our commitment to bring down the severity and frequency of load shedding and eventually end it altogether. People also expect us to have implementable plans to put an end to crime and corruption and ensure that we all live in safe and secure communities. Our people expect leaders and government officials who serve them with dignity, with integrity, commitment, and diligence. We must keep these expectations in mind throughout what we discuss and throughout this dialogue. As I listened to the inputs and to some of the responses that were given, I have a sense that yes, we are focusing on some of the key issues that our people want us to focus on. Starting off with your opening remarks, Chairperson of the National House of Traditional and Khoisan Leaders, I couldn't but agree with the sentiments that you expressed, but more particularly in relation to your wish to work with government to make sure that we address the challenges that our people face. Yes, there's been slow implementation in some of the issues, And yet, as you correctly also acknowledged, there has been progress in a number of areas. We considered today the progress that has been made since the last dialogue in 2022, and you have also considered the address I delivered during the annual opening of this House in the NCOP chamber on the 23rd of February of this year. I would like to appreciate the updates that have been given by ministers. The mere presence of so many ministers and deputy ministers here in this engagement just goes to demonstrate the seriousness with which we in government regard the relationship with our traditional leaders. In my view, this reconfirms our commitment that we made, that we are determined and prepared to work with our traditional leaders to address many of the challenges that you face. I was pleased to be advised that issues such as, which you raised as a very important issue, the issue of Invest Rural Strategy, has now been mainstreamed into the Integrated Rural Development Strategy of the Department of Agriculture, Land Reform and Rural Development. In addition, SALGA and the House are clearly taking forward the resolution of last year's local government summit, in terms of which the Invest Rural Master Plan was to be shared with and brought to the attention of municipalities so that it can inform their local economic development programs. In this regard, I am advised that the House has now been invited to SALGA's National Rural Development Indaba, particularly with the intention of creating a platform for the engagement or for an engagement in the Rural Invest Master Plan. Now, this, in my book, represents great progress. When this House, yourselves as traditional leaders, first came up with the Invest Rural Master Plan, a number of people in our country just dismissed it. And I welcomed when Nkosi Mahlangu, his soul rest in peace, handed it to me, and I'm glad that it has now been mainstreamed and it is being taken very seriously. Certainly, on our part in government, we do take it seriously, and our interaction with yourselves on this plan is meaningful, and I do believe that it will lead to the development that we all seek to see. So in the end, matters that you raise are being taken up, and what Deputy Chairperson of the House also raised here, which I'd like to respond to, are also being taken up. During the opening address of February 2023, I touched on the important work that the Commission of Khoisan Matters has already embarked on to facilitate the recognition of Khoisan communities and leaders, and let us continue to support this work so that we can soon have Khoisan leaders taking their place, their rightful place in the national, provincial, local houses of traditional and Khoisan leaders. I am pleased about the progress that has been reported by Minister Creasy with regards to the very good partnership that has been struck between Khoisan leaders as on the issue of rooibos. We need to mobilize around a new way of doing things, which is in the form of the district development model. Your participation in implementing this model is very critical. We must all redouble our efforts in implementing the district development model. And we must go beyond just talking about the DDM. We must now move towards implementation of that plan. What it really seeks to do is to break down this silo mentality of doing things, that things of a developmental nature are best done when we integrate our work, when we have a joined up government where every key role player or stakeholder in any community work together. As we said before, we will need your counsel in identifying the endowments, competitive advantages, and potential future industrial makeup of each of the localities with yourselves as the traditional leaders of our people. Deputy Chairperson Mavuso raised a number of issues, and he was very colorful in presenting some of these and very demonstrative in putting them forward, largely drawing from his own experience as a person who was born and has lived in the rural areas, and he gave a lot of color to quite a number of things that he was talking about. But let me start off with the one that he articulated first, where he spoke about the need for uniform treatment of traditional leaders. There has been a sense that there is ununiform treatment of traditional leaders, and you as our traditional leaders correctly raise this issue, where you have a sense that other traditional leaders are treated specially and differently. And of course, everything that we seek to do as a government is to make sure that there is uniformity and that there is equitable treatment of the various sectors of the citizenry of our country. And you therefore want uniformity and standardization in terms of treatment and the provision of support to traditional leaders. The Khoisan colleagues are not mentioned because of the process that is still underway and that you have acknowledged. I should say that, yes, this is a principle that we are committed to. And in the course of raising this matter, you of course raise the issue of the chambers that are in provinces, and a number of provinces do not have any of these chambers. But I particularly liked the way you were raising it because you were very positive. And the minister who's sitting next to me there whispered in my ear and says, "President, this is a quick win, because we do have a number of buildings that are strewn right throughout the country, and I see no difficulty in getting some of those buildings, and some of them were used in the past during the apartheid days, no difficulty at all in getting some of these buildings transformed into chambers, so that yes, we should have those chambers used for good effect." So for me, it is easy to do, it is low-hanging fruit, and the Minister Nkadimeng as well as Minister Zikalala will make sure that it happens. They should go ahead and indeed make it happen. If they do not, you should help me in making them do their job, because it must be done. Now, you spoke about the handbook of Amakosi. It's a very good point that you raise, and indeed, you even call it a secret handbook. There's no secrecy about this handbook, but you do want this handbook to be put on the table, and you recommend that this must indeed be fully packaged and finalized, and you request that the minister should speed up the process and provinces to budget accordingly for the implementation of the handbook. In the end, this is a matter that affects the fiscal process that we have to embark upon. So a handbook like that is accompanied by a full budget. So this is a matter that needs to be properly processed, and indeed we do agree that we do need a handbook. The handbook will also help in making sure that there is no ununiform treatment of our traditional leaders. It will lead to uniformity. It will lead to people knowing exactly what they are expected to do as they exercise their leadership, and what their tools of trade will be, because the handbook will also encompass things such as the tools of trade. You have raised the issue of tools of trade in the past, and Khosi Mokoena even came to Mahlamba Ndlovu and had a lunch, and we discussed the issue of tools of trade. And we agreed that tools of trade is a matter that should be embarked upon and addressed. And the handbook will help us in making sure that the tools of trade that you need to execute your task as traditional leaders is clearly set out, and where there are budgetary implications, we should be able to do precisely that. You raised the issue of budget for the structures of Amakosi, and you say the structures of Amakosi are not budgeted for in the same way, and you say it depends on the province concerned. Yes, it has been the practice, and through, for instance, getting to a point where there's a measure of uniformity, the whole process of the handbook and budgeting for our traditional leaders will then be streamlined. You correctly raised the issue of youth development. There are many youth structures, you say, in areas of Amakosi that need assistance in order for them to develop. It can either be community development, entrepreneurial development, and this, we believe, is a very good point to raise. But once again, it has budgetary implications, and it needs to fit into our development trajectory. But indeed, we do want the youth of our country who are in the rural areas to know that development is a process that we also want them to be a part of. And you need the funding of development of young people to realize their potential in economic development. So this we also agree with you on. The issue of release of land is a matter that you have raised over and over, and I'm really glad that we have had all these various discussions, including what Deputy Minister Skwatsha was reporting on. The matter, yes, is going to come to Cabinet so that we can look at the full proposals that have come forward from the Interministerial Task Team, as well as the various summits that you have held. Khosi Siahlolo was saying to me, this is an urgent matter, and it is a matter that you have dealt with for thousands and thousands of years. And I agreed with him that yes, that is so. We, however, need to deal with some of the challenges that keep on arising around the land issue, particularly the release of the land. And of course, your proposal is release the land to us as traditional leaders. And while I agree with that to the traditional authorities, while one agrees with that completely, he and I, in whispering to each other, said we must, however, find a solution to some of the practices that we have seen emerging, where some traditional leaders sell off the land, get the money, and pocket it for themselves. Without that money, being there to benefit the community as a whole. This is a problem, and Khosi Siahlolo agrees that we need to find a solution for this. As the matter comes to cabinet, we will want to have heard your proposals, as he was suggesting to me, on how best we can deal with this. But as regards our level of seriousness in dealing with this matter, I can assure you that yes, this matter has been outstanding for far too long, and you would like the land to be released, and that is precisely what we aim to finally do. But in doing so, we must come up with the modalities that will avoid conflicts in our communities, the modalities that will ensure that there is full harmony in our communities, and where there will be accountability as we deal with this very serious and important matter. I do believe that we should be close to a full solution on this matter because it has been discussed over and over again. You also raised the issue of mining for economic development. This too is an important matter. There are, you say, a lot of mining activities happening in the areas of Amakosi. This indeed is without any doubt the truth. And you say that one cannot point to any benefits that accrued to the communities as a result of mining activities. And you make recommendations in this regard, that yes, DMRE, which is the ministry that is responsible for mining, must find space and time to engage Amakosi as opposed to them just going to areas of Amakosi and without any form of consultation. And you also say that this is what Deputy Chairperson Mavuso was saying, this will avoid a situation such as the one that we had in Ekolobeni, where there could have been proper consultation, and Minister Gwede Mantashe is not here because he would have put forward the approach that they had. This too is important because mining activities, yes, in the main, happen in areas, in the rural areas, which are under the jurisdiction of our traditional leaders. Quite often, as the deals are struck, we do, through legislation, insist that there should be involvement by our people through the laws that we have put in place, be they the broad-based Black Economic Empowerment Act or not. And quite often we find that when trusts are set up, at times the funds that accrue to those trusts are dealt with in a way that creates divisions amongst our people. This we may not want to talk about, but that is the reality. As government, we are now having to deal with a number of situations where trusts having received money, we find that the funds that have accrued to those trusts then lead to lots of divisions. My traditional leaders, we do need to find ways of addressing these issues quite honestly and frontally, so that whatever progress is made in this regard is the type of progress that will be to the benefit of our people. Minister Creasy's report on how the issue of rooibos is being dealt with in relation to the Khoisan communities is a wonderful example that we should all emulate, where a trust has been set up and the proceeds thereof are then used for the benefit of the community as a whole, without creating any doubt or suspicions about how those benefits are being utilized. Minister Zizi Kodwa spoke quite eloquently here about the issues of culture. And Deputy Chairperson Mavuso raised the issue of cultural tourism for rural economic development. This is a matter that we have discussed in the past, and we agree with the approach that you have articulated in this regard. And you also have added that the Department of Tourism should provide a guide on profiling tourist attraction areas. And we have also said you also need to be actively involved, and I do believe that with the Rural Invest strategy, we should be able to identify a number of iconic places in the various rural areas which can lead to economic development through tourism. Your relationship and partnership with SALGA is to be applauded, and we applaud that. Yes, we have promoted the King's Forum concept, and I'm glad that it has received resonance. But it's beyond just kings, because we've also got queens. So it's the Kings and Queens Forum, where we would have an opportunity to engage some of our kings and queens on a number of important issues. In this regard, you have also raised another important issue, that for instance, when we, for instance, open Parliament, we should have an opportunity or a practice where we will be able to have our traditional leaders participating. On infrastructure, as I've often said, is the flywheel that really should drive our economic growth. And we want to see this also happening in our rural areas. You heard the eloquent explanation from Minister Zigalala about various projects that we are going to be focusing on. Yes, the Deputy Chairperson Mavuso zeroed into a project that has been under discussion for more than 20 years, the Umzimvubu Dam. And as we announced in SONA, we are now going to proceed with it, and it is a two-dam type of project which we are now going to start. And the preparatory work should now get underway. But that speaks volumes of the infrastructure projects, and some of which are quite catalytic, that we need to embark upon. We have identified the issue of bridges. And the issues of bridges are quite critical, because some of the bridges are washed away whenever your areas experience floods that just damage the infrastructure. But at the same time, the bridges also play an economic and a social key role. Minister Zigalala, as you heard, will be going around the country, making sure that the bridges that we have committed to build are indeed going to be built, and I have no doubt that we are going to see a great deal of progress in that regard. In this regard, Minister Zigalala will make sure that, yes, he engages with yourselves and goes to those places with yourselves so that we can ensure that those bridges indeed are under construction. And time permitting, I would like also to accompany you and Minister Zigalala and his deputy as we go and look at all these bridges. You've raised another important issue, which is communication and digital technologies. You have said you appreciate that the former minister responsible for communications and digital technologies has done quite a lot of work in this regard. As you correctly say, she requested that you submit to her the addresses of some of the traditional councils, which she has already put in the plan that the department will be focusing on. And this is the work that will be continued by Minister Gungubele, as he's now been put in that position. Now, this, in my view, represents progress, in relation to an important issue that you have raised. It is concerning to us that rural areas in our countries have very poor connectivity. And this is a challenge that we are determined to address. Not only because a minister like Mantashe lives in Kala, where he often complains to me whenever I call him for work-related issues. He says, "President, I don't have connectivity because I'm in Kala." So we want to solve the problem for the many Kalas around the country so that we have good connectivity. You raised the issue of the safety of traditional leaders. This issue was raised quite pointedly with me again when I was in KZN meeting our traditional leaders there. They raised this issue in quite a sharp manner, and you've given us the figures that up to 40 or so traditional leaders in KZN have been murdered or killed. And you yourself, Deputy Chairperson Mavuso, you say you have your own challenges, although you did not describe what those challenges are. Now, we are committed to providing safe environments to our leaders, be they elected leaders, be they leaders like yourselves, and traditional leaders. I know in KZN, Eastern Cape and Limpopo are facing these difficulties and death on a daily basis because the killing of traditional leaders has gone on for far too long and cannot, as you correctly say, be tolerated any longer. And in this regard, I do know that the Ministry of Police is working with a number of you as traditional leaders, making sure that processes and measures are put in place, yes, to help secure the safety of our traditional leaders. But I've often said the strength of being able to do so should also revolve around the community policing forum process, because it is through community forum policing that we will be able to deal with some of these issues. When I was in KZN just over the weekend, I got a really good report in one of our districts where the chairperson of the community policing forum informed me that their community policing forum, in which the traditional leaders also participate, has brought the levels of criminality down in that district, and things such as murder, even gender-based violence, and things like robbery and theft have really come down because all the key role players do participate in the community policing forum, and all the key people do help to bring down the levels of crime. And this would also impact on another matter you've raised, which with regard to human trafficking, because human trafficking is another major challenge that you face. You also raised the issue of traditional police. It is the view of Amakosi, you say, that the rollout of traditional policing concept will ease the pressure that our men and women in blue are faced with. You believe that if recruitment is done properly and deployment is done, the same traditional police may be used to protect Amakosi. Yes, that is the proposal that you're putting forward, and you'd like traditional police to be recruited. This is a matter that, yes, should be discussed. Right now we are on a big recruitment drive, bringing in more police trainees into the police, as we promised in SONA. So this needs to be discussed properly within the context of what the police service is all about. You touched on customary initiation. This is a matter that I have raised in the House of Traditional Leaders, and I even raised it this year. The Customary Initiation Act, yes, was passed with the intention for the betterment of the initiation practice. And however you say, proper funding and training